Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my semi-annual public service about 2026's second pair of eclipses, the solar eclipse of August 12th and the lunar eclipse of August 27th or 28th, depending upon which longitude you live at. I know I'm a little behind on this one because I've had a lot of other projects going on that require my writing and computer expertise. Not that I'm complaining, because one of them is going to lead to my graduation on September 11th from a year-long program that I've been in, and I'll explain more about that later. And you'll probably notice some clips look different because of some computer glitches on my first attempt, where I had to re-record them at a different time of day and splice them in. But the video is still timely. I'm releasing it inside the 2-week window in between the eclipses, and their energy has been fully active since about a month before the first one even got here. I'm going to flip my usual order and talk about the astrology first and then do the magical working. Here's the horoscope for the solar eclipse of August 12th, 1:30 p.m. over Washington, D.C. Now remember, I'm using sidereal reckoning, which is 24 degrees backward from most Western astrology. So the eclipse was in Cancer, not Leo. However, the eclipse point itself, K2, the south node, is in Leo. You can see it's about 10 degrees away from the sun and moon, but that was still close enough to make it a total eclipse, with Iceland and Spain getting the best views. So this eclipse actually straddles two signs, with the energies of both signs in play. If you've been following me for a while, you may remember a few years back when I discussed the last time this happened, when it straddled Virgo and Libra. This time, it's Cancer and Leo, which are ruled by the two eclipsing planets themselves, Moon and Sun, respectively. This is apt to make it feel especially intense, like there's nowhere you can hide or get any relief. Record-high temperatures all over the world are enough to illustrate this, with Leo being a fire sign. When you consider Cancer and Leo together, you get a real interesting push-me-pull-you dynamic going on. Cancer is a water sign that's all about your emotional nature. How do you feel about the environment you're floating in? It's not proactive. It's not a sign of action. It's about creature comforts. Nice, soft, warm, fuzzy, wrapped around you. How well are you being nurtured? That's why it's also the sign of the mother, our first nurturer. But in the end, we all have to learn how to nurture ourselves, be our own mothers. Because Cancer is the part of us that wants to be taken care of, it's also the sign where we are apt to feel very vulnerable. How safe are we in letting our guard down? There's apt to be some area of life where we are not that safe, where we are easily hurt, deeply. And that's where Leo comes in as the next sign. Ruled by the sun, it's the sign of the king and very proactive. It shows where you are apt to use that power to overcompensate for your sense of vulnerability. You'll do anything to not feel so helpless ever again. As you might expect, this drive can get really dark, depending upon which two adjoining houses in your own horoscope Cancer and Leo fall onto. As an example, if you're Capricorn rising, that puts Cancer ruling your 7th house of marriage and partnerships. That's the area of life where you tend to feel really vulnerable. It then follows that Leo will rule your 8th house the part of your life where you have no control over anything. But you'll overcompensate for your sense of vulnerability regarding your partner by controlling who? Your partner. How well you think that's gonna work, partner? The more you try to hang on, make that person conform to what you think they should be, the more they'll slip away. 8th house is all about sudden breaks and changes, and K2 transiting through there, at least for a Capricorn, is going to hammer that lesson home until you get it. What's a real-life example we can look at involving public figures? How about a pair of massively overconfident men trying desperately to show how strong and dominant they are? But the instant they have to face real justice for their crimes, they revert to being whiny little babies about the living conditions inside a jail cell. Ever hear of the Tate brothers? I'll give you another example, this one from my own life. I am Taurus rising, which puts Cancer over my 3rd house. Some of what the 3rd house is about is siblings, competition, people you have to fight with in your early life to gain the attention of your parents. But it also rules your early schooling, elementary and middle levels. The house opposite, the 9th, rules higher education, high school, college, and graduate school if you go that far. Being born with Mars in Cancer, where it's debilitated, my 3rd house was in terrible shape for my early years. The upside of this is the 3rd is one of those houses that improves over time. But where do you think I was going to feel the most vulnerable? You guessed it, elementary and middle school. I was born into upper-class wealth and privilege, and yet school bullies treated me as though I didn't deserve to even exist. Kicking, punching, insulting, ambushing me every chance they got, and they wouldn't even tell me why. What was so terribly wrong with me? By the time my parents realized what was really going on and moved me to a better school, I was already deeply scarred. I've had complex PTSD ever since. How did I use the power of my sun to overcompensate for that? By ferociously throwing myself into the life of higher education, becoming Phi Beta Kappa to prove I'm not stupid, finding out that I have a great singing voice and running with it, developing into a classical soprano at a pretty high level, in the hope that the applause I'd get for that would drown out the reverberating memories of everyone who'd called me such terrible things and make me feel loved. Use this eclipse time to examine where you have felt vulnerable and how you have overcompensated. Has it given you the satisfaction you thought it ought to? And if not, how could you repurpose that for the benefit of more than just yourself? Pretty much everything I've ever accomplished in my life has been a big fuck you to everybody who's ever been mean to me. Stick a pin in that. We'll come back to it when we talk about the lunar eclipse. First, something else I want you to notice about the solar eclipse. There are 2 benefic planets, Mercury and Jupiter, conjoined the moon and sun, and Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. But all 4 of them are hemmed in between 2 malefic planets, Mars behind them, K2 ahead of them. Hemming in astrology acts like a sort of handcuffs, where the planet that's in between the malefics can't exert its full power. So light and breezy Mercury can't charm his way out of a hostile situation, and Jupiter's wisdom is apt to fall on deaf ears. Or at least it becomes very difficult. You're in a situation where somebody else has already decided your fate. Does this remind you of anything? Remember, Cancer is a water sign. How about that enormous aircraft carrier, the USS Lincoln, trapped in the Strait of Hormuz, hasn't put into port for 9 months, running out of supplies, mold running rampant all over the ship, and sailors jumping overboard to try to swim to shore? It wasn't until the sun moved into Leo a few days later that the ship finally got moving again and is now heading home. But another water-based scandal is how Trump has just scaled back military exercises for Navy ships off the coast of Korea. Those ships have been protectors of South Korea for decades. I haven't read more of the journalism on this, but it sure sounds like he's just given Kim Jong-un tacit permission to overrun South Korea and reclaim it. One good result that is coming out of this hemming of the water sign is more and more people are realizing that building AI data centers would create a massive water crisis because they require enormous amounts of water to cool the machinery, which many communities where they're being proposed don't have. Same goes for those stupid ICE detention centers. You can't run plumbing and sewer lines where the capacity for them is already maxed out. Hear the words of James Tallarico of Texas. If these data centers can't pay for their own energy, if they can't recycle their water and fund the water infrastructure necessary to operate the facilities, if they can't produce good-paying union jobs, if they can't get the consent of the people who live in those communities, then they shouldn't be built. Period. Full stop. Stick a pin in that one, too. Something else that's notable about the solar eclipse is how Mars is casting a one-way aspect onto Venus. Vedic astrology has fewer aspects that you have to look at, but their meaning is clearer. As you might expect, Venus and Mars have the highest sexual charge of all the planets, especially in combination. But when the aspect is one way, especially when the receiving planet Venus is already debilitated in Virgo, yeah. Kinda sounds like a sexual assault, doesn't it? Look at the enormous misogyny that's inflaming the country now, the hammering down upon women's rights, upon their very humanity, the pedophilia scandals and protection of the perps in high places, even the exploitation of Venusian beauty to carry water for patriarchy. Whatever harms women and girls harms everybody. Honey, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And then there's this comfort blonde following Trump around like a fawning little puppy, who looks cringily like his own daughter Ivanka, known as the human printer, for giving him stories that feed his ego, didn't even have a security clearance for more than a year, and claiming that Trump saved her life with his Right to Try Act. Excuse me, this is the same guy who misappropriated funds from his own cancer charity for his 2016 campaign. He's never done anything kind or selfless or good Samaritan-ish in his life. every favor comes with some kind of extortion. Okay, for the record, because I was today years old when I heard about the right to try law, which sounds like it should have been a bigger deal than it was when Trump signed it in 2018, 8 years ago, during his first term. But it must have gotten buried under other news. It was first proposed by Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, and it gives terminal patients the right to try investigational treatments that have passed the first round of clinical trials but have not yet been FDA approved. Natalie Harp was treated for a rare bone cancer with a drug that was FDA approved, just not for that purpose, which was already legal before right to try. Got it? By that measure, her treatment was similar to the clinical trial I was in for Keytruda 4 years ago in 22, which was already FDA approved for other types of cancer, but not yet for ovarian or uterine cancers. That's what the trial was for. It was recruiting 800 patients nationwide for the second round. I signed up to be one of them after consultation with several doctors. So as usual, Trump is claiming credit for something he probably never even looked at while he was signing it. But now he's using it to make him look like the freaking Messiah, using this Venusian gal as a prop, as if she's the one exception that absolves him of everything else. But Venus is getting help from a mutual aspect with Saturn in Pisces, where Saturn is both ruled by and receiving a one-way aspect from exalted Jupiter. Saturn is maturity. He and Venus are friendly to each other. Saturn helps Venus take a more realistic view of sexual relationships. And if that means women have to say, "All right, nobody gets any nookie until men grow the fuck up already," so be it. Saturn does give the ability to hold out, and he always gets the last word on everything. Now let's look at the lunar eclipse for August 28th. This is what happens when the Earth is directly in between the Sun and Moon, so that the Earth casts a shadow upon the full moon and makes it turn blood red. This is an almost total eclipse, visible over the Americas, Africa, Western Europe, but not Asia or Australia. All the same aspects are still in play, because Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn are still in the same signs. But now the Sun has moved on to his home sign of Leo, with Mercury deeply combust behind him. This leads to fiery communications. Moon has come around to join the North Node in Aquarius. But the really important point is the degree of the lunar mansion she's in. Shatabishach. This is the 24th of the 27 lunar mansions that run behind the scenes of the sun signs you already know. This one happens to be my own moon's birth star. So I personally am taking a direct hit from this, and I've seen it coming for months, but even I have been shocked at the intensity of the PTSD that has come roaring back for the last month. The moon is one's emotions, one's feeling nature. Didn't help matters that a cat that I'd been fostering for the previous 9 months was reclaimed by her true owner, so I abruptly lost the pressure release valve that is a cat's superpower. And I honestly don't know what to do about this. Of course, getting another cat will help, But the people whom I need to demand apologies from, most of them are beyond my reach by now. So all the things that I would say to them if I could have nowhere to go. I've lived with this for so long that if by some grace of God a few of them actually showed me genuine remorse, I don't know how I'd feel. But what is Shatabishak supposed to be good at? Turning a poison into an elixir. And the lunar eclipse happens to be 2 weeks away from my graduation from a program I've been in since last October. It's called Partners in Policymaking, which is all about people with disabilities learning to work with lawmakers and state and federal agencies to effect social improvements. Never in a million years did I think I'd be doing this, considering how much my younger self was all about being loved through my musical and other showbiz accomplishments. It was the only professional field I knew where having feelings was an asset instead of something that is always being weaponized against me. But disability advocacy is not about me personally, or about finally getting satisfaction to make up for past emotional injuries. Moon in Aquarius is about mass social movements. So, turning my autism, which I didn't even know I had until 3 years ago, into a potent force for long overdue justice, is an appropriate use of this energy. And I'm doing it at what may be the worst possible time, because protections for people with disabilities, indeed protections for all vulnerable populations, are being rolled back. But that's all the more reason to do it. And I can still use my singing for that purpose. I can sing rings around any ice agent. You've got it coming. You've got it coming. You'll only have yourselves to blame.
What you gonna do? Arrest me for assault with a deadly opera voice?
There's one other thing I want you to look at with these eclipses, and that is the nodal axis itself. If you've watched my other videos, you remember how Rahu, the north node, gives you obsessions, and Ketu, the south node, gives you revulsions. Notice how they're opposite sides of the same coin. Ketu also brings uncomfortable scrutiny, while Rahu is about technical innovation and electricity. They are slow-moving mathematical points. They take 18 months to travel backwards through a sign and 18 years to traverse the entire zodiac. They have been in Aquarius and Leo since June of 2025. In that time period, look at what has happened. AI data centers, flock cameras, and the latest horror of ICE's electrocuting gloves. Rahu accelerates things. It's shocking how fast all of this has ramped up. 2 years ago, we'd never even heard of flock cameras. The secret police of regimes past would have salivated over what this technology can do now. Everywhere we go, everything we read online, everyone we talk to, even everything we think but don't dare say out loud, which used to be only the stuff of science fiction. It's all possible now. We have become the surveillance state our grandparents feared, all while crowing to the skies that we're the land of the free. Humanity is not designed to live under the constant threat of annihilation 24/7, 365. The nodes change signs right around Thanksgiving after the 2020 midterm elections, and they'll move to Capricorn and Cancer, respectively. At that point, we will all, the powerful and powerless alike, have to put serious focus on the ethical use of this technology if we can't shove the genie back into the bottle. In the meantime, we're seeing lots of citizen action to stop data centers and detention centers from being built. We've had to move away from mass protests in the streets, but that doesn't mean we're beaten. We're resorting to flooding public hearings and guerrilla sabotage. So if you see the guy who stole all the flocks, no, you didn't. Water balloons might become the new Molotov cocktails. But you didn't hear that from little old me. But no matter what happens, whatever fresh outrages the media reports or doesn't report, never forget what is underlying everything. The ultimate end game of the MAGA movement. Restore the absolute dominance of white, hetero, Christian men as the only people who have authority, jobs, money, privilege. No violence is too ruthless, no insults too extreme, no grift too corrupt, no harm too unjust. If only they can get back their lost dominance. Every atrocity is an acceptable price to pay as long as it brings back a mythical America that never really existed. Use the scrutiny of K2 to see through every move. It all has to be viewed through the lens of the ultimate goal of white, hetero, Christian, male supremacy. All of it. And that brings us back to the overcompensation of men trying to overcome their sense of butthurt with machismo. And that's why, to wrap this up with the magical working now, I am borrowing a channeled message from someone named Umbre et Lucis. Obviously a pen name. I have no idea who the actual author is, but I want to give credit where credit is due. It sounds like something written on an ancient papyrus scroll, but it's speaking to our time now. And in the latter age, when kingdoms fed upon the weak, and merchants weighed the souls of children against gold, the queen stirred once more beyond the unseen veil. Not for the mighty alone did she descend, nor for temples of marble, nor for those who spoke her 1,000 hidden names. She came for the forgotten, for the child left trembling in the shadow of violence, for the woman silenced beneath cruel hands, for the elder abandoned to hunger and cold, for the stranger cast beyond the gates, for every soul upon whom power fell without mercy. And the queen spoke unto the rulers of the earth. You have mistaken dominion for wisdom. You have clothed appetite in the garments of law. You build thrones from fear, then wonder why the foundations crack beneath you. Know this. No empire endures that devours its own children. No covenant stands that abandons compassion. No hand raised in cruelty escapes the measure of its own weight. I am the memory beneath the world. I am the balance long denied. I am the flame within conscience, which no darkness can wholly extinguish. Where pity is slain, there shall come famine of spirit. Where truth is mocked, there shall come division and madness. Where the helpless are offered to suffering, there shall the pillars of power tremble. Then were signs seen in many places, the proud brought low by their own excess, the hidden made visible, the voices once ignored rising like thunder through the streets of nations. Yet even then the queen did not call first for destruction, but remembrance. For her law was older than crowns, that strength exists to protect, that wisdom exists to serve, that every living being carries a spark beyond price. And she declared, "Whoever shelters the vulnerable shelters me. Whoever wounds them wounds the order of heaven itself. For the least among you are not forgotten, and no cry vanishes into silence forever." Then the heavens grew still, as though awaiting the answer of humankind. For the ending and the beginning had become one circle, and the measure of every civilization would be the mercy it showed when mercy was hardest to give. Stay frosty, and I'll see you next time.